Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
It's up to the people of Afghanistan to decide on what government they want.
It gives me no joy to say this every day, but it must be said. The Taliban are growing stronger. They claim control of 85% of Afghanistan. They're capturing border posts to control trade with neighbors. They're hosting press conferences to say that Islamic law will be implemented in the country. They're also inviting the Chinese, promising safety and security for their projects. Where is the Afghan government? It says the loss of certain territories is by design, part of their strategic consolidation. It makes little sense. Where are the Americans? Out. Biden says they've achieved what they wanted to. Nation building is not their responsibility. Well, bombing the nation wasn't their right either, but they did it. Now they've lost the war and lost face, no matter what they claim. What about the others? Well, India, for one, is engaging with Iran and Russia. Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar is visiting. Interestingly, at the same time, top Taliban delegations held talks with both these countries, rather. Is this a coincidence or another indication of India's back-channel talks with the Taliban? On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss also on the show fresh doubts over Chinese vaccines. A scientist leading Sinovac trials dies of suspected COVID infection in Indonesia. Many medical workers reported dead despite taking Chinese shots. What's a superhero vaccine? Based on the DNA of Olympic athletes, it can reportedly offer protection against heart diseases. Is this advancement of science or humans dangerously playing with nature in their quest for perfection? And another factory fire in Bangladesh leaves more than 50 workers dead. We bring you a special report from Dhaka on the world's manufacturing hub and its repeated fire disasters. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar addressed a press conference with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov during his Moscow visit and stressed on the immediate need for reduction of violence in Afghanistan.
Violence cannot be the solution for the situation in Afghanistan.
S. Jaishankar said both India and Russia are committed to an independent, sovereign, united and democratic Afghanistan. The United States is set to widen its economic blacklist as it looks to add 10 Chinese companies to the list. More Beijing-based firms will face a ban over alleged human rights abuses and high-tech surveillance in Xinjiang. Beijing has said that it will take all necessary measures to safeguard the interests of Chinese companies. A comprehensive joint study from multiple universities in the UK has said that the risk of severe illness or death among children due to COVID-19 is extremely low. The study says that children suffering from chronic illness and neurodisabilities were under maximum risk. The US FDA, in response to Pfizer's application seeking a booster shot for its COVID vaccine, has said that fully vaccinated Americans do not need to get a third jab and that it would need more data on hand for authorization.
Wayne Couzens pleaded guilty to the murder of Sarah Everard. All of us in the Met are sickened, angered and devastated.
British police officer Wayne Couzens has admitted to the murder of Sarah Everard, whose disappearance sparked outrage and a nationwide debate on women's safety. Police clashed with armed bandits in the favelas of Caracas in Venezuela. At least 4 people have died in the clashes since Wednesday. A $500,000 bounty has been announced to help law enforcement agencies capture the gang leaders. India's southern state of Kerala has recorded 14 cases of the Zika virus, a viral infection that is transmitted by mosquitoes. Health authorities have declared a state of alert in all districts, with a central team of experts dispatched to monitor the situation. Europe's largest active volcano, Mount Etna in Sicily, sent an eruptive cloud that reached a height of 11 kilometers above sea level. The eruption also caused ash and debris to fall on some villages located on the slopes of the volcano.
The Phoenix Suns are just 2 wins away from winning their first NBA title after beating the Milwaukee Bucks 118-108 in Game 2. Giannis Antetokounmpo scored 42 points, but he did not get enough support from his Bucks teammates. All-star Devin Booker led the Suns with 31 points. Chris Paul added 23, while Michael Bridges bagged a career playoff high 27 points. The trilogy fight between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder in Las Vegas on the 24th of July has been postponed. The Briton Fury has tested positive for COVID-19 alongside a few other members of his training team in America. And after medical advice, the fight has been called off and is likely to now be held in October. Fury had beaten Wilder in early 2020 to win the WBC World Heavyweight title after their first fight in 2018 had ended in a draw.
Afghanistan is falling to the Taliban. They claim to have 85% of the country under their control. The focus now is on the border, strategic checkpoints that control trade with neighbors. The Taliban is gaining control of them. Today they captured the Islam Kala crossing. This is one of the biggest trade routes between Afghanistan and Iran. Reports say this route generates a revenue of $20 million every month for the Afghan government. Now it is in the hands of the Taliban, a big source of money and more fodder for their propaganda machine. They've been sharing videos like this one. It is believed to be from the Islam Kala crossing. The Taliban can be seen taking down the Afghan flag from the roof of the border customs office. What's the Afghanistan government doing? They say, beginning efforts to take back this territory. It looks like an uphill task for these forces. In recent weeks, the Afghan government has lost several districts near the borders. Afghanistan shares borders with 7 countries. In the last 1 week, the Taliban has taken control of border areas along at least 5 of them: Iran, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, China and Pakistan. Look at this map. The Taliban has captured several districts along the border. The aim is clear: gaining control of key checkpoints on Afghanistan's borders. The Taliban can do a lot of damage with this. They can dictate who or what gets in or out. They can control the flow of essentials, choke supplies to areas that fall under the civilian government. The Taliban could potentially use these routes for smuggling. With the fall of every district, the group is gaining strength. The Taliban now claims to control 85% of Afghanistan, a claim that is disputed by the Afghan government and impossible to verify independently. Today, the Taliban's representatives were in Moscow. The delegation was there to offer assurances that their gains on the battleground do not threaten Russia or Russian allies in Central Asia. They even held a press conference. With momentum on their side, the Taliban was clearly trying to dictate the terms. They said they want every Afghan to be a stakeholder in building Afghanistan, but there won't be any compromise on the implementation of Islamic law.
We have commitment that we will not allow any individual, any entity to use the soil of the neighboring country, the regional country, and the world country, including the United States and its allies.
We want all sections of the Afghan society, without depending on their size and ethnicity, to take part in Afghanistan's state building. We stay at the position of the Islamic law.
A lot of promises were made in this press conference. The Taliban said they will not allow terrorists to operate, coming from what has itself been a terror group. Humanitarian organizations will be allowed to operate in Afghanistan. Allowed, mark the words. It said that there will be no military activity in the 34 provinces of Afghanistan. But it did not explain what is happening right now. If there is to be no violence, no terrorism, then why is the Taliban pushing Afghanistan towards a civil war now? Why is it trying to take territory by force? As of today, their only motive appears to be to control power, not share it. Not to rebuild Afghanistan, but to recapture it. They're also scouting for willing allies, those who don't believe in democracy or basic freedoms or power sharing. I'll give you an example. The Taliban says it is ready to welcome China into Afghanistan with open arms. They see Beijing as a friend. They want to roll out the red carpet for China. They want China to begin reconstruction work in Afghanistan, quote unquote, as soon as possible. These are the words of Taliban spokesperson Suhail Shaheen. Let me quote from what he said. He said, "We welcome them. If they have investments, of course we'll ensure their safety. Their safety is very important for us." China's safety is very important for the Taliban, they say, and there's more. "We have been to China many times and we have good relations with them. China is a friendly country that we welcome them for reconstruction and developing Afghanistan." Well, Beijing saw the writing on the wall for America. It knew that American troop withdrawal was only a matter of time, so it started working on the Taliban. It expanded engagements. It started calling them to China for a dialogue, and now the Chinese are ready to swoop upon Afghanistan. What is America going to do about this? Well, for the moment, nothing. Last night, US President Joe Biden held a press conference. He said the US did not come to Afghanistan for nation building. It's up to the people of Afghanistan to decide what they want for their future.
We did not go to Afghanistan to nation build. And it's the right and the responsibility of the Afghan people alone to decide their future and how they want to run their country. It's up to the people of Afghanistan to decide on what government they want, not us to impose the government on them. To be clear, countries in the region have an essential role to play in supporting a peaceful settlement. We'll work with them, and they should help step up their efforts as well.
And they should help step up their efforts as well. That was the US president shifting the onus on Afghanistan's neighbors. The message is clear. Washington is non-committal about a peaceful transition in Afghanistan, and it's up to Afghanistan and its neighbors now to clean up the mess that the American troops are leaving behind. Thankfully, not everyone has left Afghanistan to its fate. Today, India and Russia held a high-level engagement. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar is in Moscow for 2 days. Earlier this week, he was in Tehran to discuss the situation in Afghanistan. After the talks today, the Russian foreign minister did not mince words in his assessment. He said that he was concerned about the rapid capture of territory by the Taliban.
Of course, the events in Afghanistan concern us due to the possibility of these problems spreading on the territory of our allies. As to the fact that the Talibs have captured the checkpoints on the borders of Iran and Tajikistan, while it is happening on the Afghan territory, we do not intend to react in any way, except for the persistent reiteration of calls for the start of the political process, which all the Afghans supported with their voices.
What did India have to say? Minister Jaishankar voiced his concern on the spiraling violence. He reaffirmed support to the democratically elected government, and he said the quote-unquote legitimacy aspect should not be ignored.
We believe that the immediate need of the day is really a reduction in violence. So the point right now we stress is that we must see a reduction in violence. Violence cannot be the solution for the situation in Afghanistan. And at the end of the day, who governs Afghanistan has a legitimacy, something which cannot and should not be ignored.
Minister Jaishankar's support to the democratically elected government is welcome. But right now, we also know that India is hedging its bets in Afghanistan, and India's External Affairs Minister could be navigating a major shift, one that could define New Delhi's future relationship with Kabul. So here's what we have. The Taliban is taking territory at lightning speed. They're offering protection to Chinese assets in Afghanistan. They're not talking about democracy or power sharing. What happens to India then? And to Indian assets and interests? External Affairs Minister Jaishankar has been crisscrossing West Asia. Last month, he visited Doha twice. This week, he made a sudden stopover in Iran. And today, he's in Russia. Do you know what's common about all these trips? Members of the Taliban just happened to be in the same city when the Indian minister was there at the same time. Their calendars have been overlapping way too much. Is this coincidence or by design? Our next report tries to sift through the clues.
A week ago, a tweet from a journalist in Afghanistan created ripples in New Delhi. He said that the Taliban met with India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. A claim that was labelled as completely false, baseless and mischievous by sources in India's Foreign Ministry. But it hasn't escaped the world's attention that Minister Jaishankar has been travelling to cities that are frequented by the Taliban. Last month he visited Doha not once but twice within a space of 7 days. Doha is the city that hosts the political office of the Taliban. This week Minister Jaishankar was in Iran, where representatives from the Taliban were meeting officials from the Afghan government. Then in Russia, just before Minister Jaishankar arrived in Moscow, Taliban's representatives just happened to be there. They were meeting Russia's special envoy to Afghanistan. Is this too much coincidence? Or is this by design? If the Indian minister is going to cities where Taliban negotiators also happen to be present at the same time, the obvious question is, did their paths cross? New Delhi won't confirm it is back-channeling with the Taliban. But there are now too many telltale signs of engagement. The first signal of interest from India's External Affairs Minister came last year.
Any peace process must be Afghan-led.
In September 2020, India decided to participate in the intra-Afghan peace talks in Doha. A senior diplomat was sent to attend the meeting in person, while Minister Jaishankar joined via video link. Representatives from the Taliban were also present. For the first time, high-ranking Indian officials were sharing the stage with the Taliban in their official capacity. And now Minister Jaishankar is personally leading India's diplomatic response to the situation in Afghanistan. In Iran, he met with the Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, the man who was chairing the mediation talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban. Jaishankar is said to have thanked Iran for bringing the two sides closer. The Taliban has reciprocated the subtle overtures from India. Recently, the group issued a statement, a strong rejection of reports that claimed the Taliban would support terrorist activities of Pakistani groups in Kashmir. The Taliban said Kashmir is India's internal matter. India's engagement with the Taliban may be a necessity. But can New Delhi trust the Taliban? The group recently attacked the Salma Dam in Herat province, a dam that was built and donated by India to Afghanistan. It is in India's interest to protect its investments in Afghanistan. There's little to suggest that the Taliban appreciates or shares this concern. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Did America betray Afghanistan? Leave it to fight the Taliban alone? Did Americans silently flee another lost war? These questions were asked all week. It began on the 2nd of July when US troops vacated Afghanistan's Bagram base late in the night, without any notice, without handing over the base to anyone. US troops left behind thousands of cars, 3.5 million items, some 5,000 Taliban prisoners, and a long list of questions. One such question was then put to US President Joe Biden the morning after Bagram. He evaded it, saying he wanted to talk about happy things. Well, 7 days later, Biden walked up to the White House East Room, and this time, with a dispassionate speech, prepared to silence millions questioning America's actions. Here's what he said.
Said in April, the United States did what we went to do in Afghanistan, to get the terrorists who attacked us on 9/11 and deliver justice to Osama bin Laden, and to degrade the terrorist threat to keep Afghanistan from becoming a base from which attacks could be continued against the United States. We achieved those objectives. That's why we went. We did not go to Afghanistan to nation build. So let me ask those who want us to stay. How many thousands more Americans' daughters and sons are you willing to risk? How long would you have them stay? I will not send another generation of Americans to war in Afghanistan with no reasonable expectation of achieving a different outcome.
What outcome is Biden talking about? What did America achieve in Afghanistan? It spent $2 trillion, 20 years, and lost 2,400 men. But did America win this war? Winners don't pull out in the dead of night. Biden says the US has achieved its objectives. What were America's objectives? What was its mission in Afghanistan? Number one, to demolish Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Number two, to rein in terror. And number three, to stop the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base. Have they achieved any of this? The Taliban is growing stronger. The Al-Qaeda is very much around. Forget reining in terror. They have legitimized terrorists as stakeholders. As for the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base, there's every indication that it's still happening. So what objectives has the US achieved? Look at what they've been up to. 13 days after the 9/11 attacks, then President George W. Bush told the US Congress that necessary actions are being taken to, quote-unquote, counter the terrorist threat to the United States. Then on the 9th of October 2001, Bush said that the US military had begun combat action in Afghanistan against Al-Qaeda terrorists and their Taliban supporters. He said the military action was part of the US campaign against terrorism and was, quote-unquote, designed to disrupt the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base of operation. On the 7th of October 2001, the US began airstrikes in Afghanistan. By November, America had toppled the Taliban government in Kabul. Many Al-Qaeda members fled to Pakistan. 10 years after invading Afghanistan, the US finally managed to kill Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. He was found in Abbottabad in Pakistan. Justice has been done, Barack Obama declared on the 1st of May 2011. 10 years later, from the same East Room, President Biden says America has achieved its objectives in Afghanistan. Sorry, it hasn't. Al-Qaeda still has its presence in Afghanistan, not as powerful perhaps as it was 2 decades back, but ready to rebuild and reintegrate itself. You see, it doesn't take very long for a terror group to do that. The US should know this, given its experience with the ISIS in West Asia. And the ISIS, by the way, also operates in Afghanistan. So much for taking out terrorists. What about the Taliban? It's making global headlines with its conquest. As we speak, the Taliban claims to control 85% of Afghanistan, and it threatens to conquer the rest. And the Americans couldn't care less. They put the Taliban on the talking table, and now they're telling Afghanistan's neighbors to act responsibly to ensure stability. The peace deal had little to do with peace. It was a botched-up exit strategy. As much a misadventure as the rest of this American operation. 2 years of peace talks. But where is the peace? America has always known that the war in Afghanistan is doomed. It is unwinnable. As early as 2009, Biden had warned Obama against deploying more troops in Afghanistan, but the US chose to stretch the stalemate for another 12 years. 12 years. Hours before Biden's speech, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said, and I'm quoting, "It's a 20-year war that has not been won militarily. And America will have no mission accomplished moment." For a terrorist, you see, surviving is winning. The Taliban is not just surviving, it is thriving. So while the US lost the war militarily, pounded bombs and declared civilian casualties as collateral damage, the least it could have done was to bring in a sense of stability to Afghanistan, train the Afghan army, help it maintain the status quo. America failed in that too. As we speak, Afghan forces are fleeing to Tajikistan. Afghanistan is slipping back to doctrinaire theocracy. Today, an ordinary Afghan is 30% more insecure than she was in 2001. Women may once again be confined to their homes. Girls may no longer be able to attend school. Afghanistan is going back in time, and this reversal has America's failure written all over it. Some reports say that Americans fled Bagram because they had intel that the Taliban would attack the airbase. Well, so much for reigning in terror. So much for a favorable outcome. Joe Biden says America was never in Afghanistan for nation building. Of course it wasn't. America invaded Afghanistan to show that it was a superpower, to show that it could drop bombs anywhere it pleased. It dropped what it called the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan as recently as 2017. It turned an entire country into its war laboratory, and when the experiment kept going wrong, it picked up its bags and left, saying, "We've achieved what we wanted to, and building your nation is not our responsibility." To me, it doesn't sound like a victory speech or a declaration. In Afghanistan, America lost. Not just in face, Chinese vaccines are quickly becoming the source of national embarrassment for Beijing. Their effectiveness is being questioned. Thailand, Bahrain, the UAE, they've all already decided to offer boosters to their citizens who got a Chinese shot. This week, Beijing got more bad news from Indonesia. The scientist who led the trials for the Sinovac vaccine in Indonesia has died, reportedly after contracting the Wuhan virus. Our next report tells you more.
Indonesia was among the few countries in the world which kicked off their vaccination program at the beginning of this year. But now Indonesia is losing its frontline warriors. This is despite access to vaccines. Chinese vaccines, to be precise. The latest victim is Novilia Syafri Bachtiar. Reports say she died of a suspected Wuhan virus infection. She was the scientist leading the trials of Sinovac in Indonesia. Sinovac is a made-in-China Wuhan virus vaccine. It's not yet clear if Bachtiar took the Sinovac shot herself, but reports say hundreds of healthcare workers have died in Indonesia, even after taking the Chinese shot. Going by one claim, more than 130 healthcare workers have died in Indonesia since June. Most of them took the Sinovac shot. This trend was bad enough. Now Bachtiar's death has led to more doubts over the efficacy of Chinese vaccines. Health experts are asking if medics should get other jabs to stay protected. Other countries in the region, too, are considering the idea. Recently in Thailand, a document from the country's health ministry leaked. It said that health workers who have got the Sinovac vaccine are worried. They want a booster shot of the Pfizer vaccine. The memo went on to say that such a move would mean admitting that the Sinovac vaccine is not effective. Even in Thailand, doctors are falling sick after taking the Chinese shot. Earlier this week, a hospital admitted 5 members of its medical staff. They tested positive for the Wuhan virus. 2 of them are critical.
Yes, here at this hospital. This means the Sinovac vaccine can't protect people from the virus and the symptoms will be severe compared to those who got the AstraZeneca vaccine, which barely has resulted in anyone being admitted to the hospital. It shows that people who are infected with the Delta variant after receiving the Sinovac vaccine, the symptoms are severe and at the same severity level as people who haven't received any vaccine at all.
The Sinovac vaccine has been approved by the World Health Organization. Its efficacy is 51%, barely enough for an approval from the World Health Body. Experts believe newer variants of the virus can escape the limited protection of Sinovac. The spike in new infections and deaths in Southeast Asian countries confirm these suspicions. With both Indonesia and Thailand now considering booster shots for their citizens, Chinese vaccines are proving to be as useless as their test kits. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
How far can we humans go in our quest for perfection? To me, it looks like there is no end. Yesterday, I told you how China is harvesting gene data of pregnant women worldwide simply because it wants to create enhanced soldiers, improve, quote-unquote, population quality, create superhuman mutations or variants. Today, I have another such story for you, and this one's not from China, thankfully. The West, too, is guilty of trying to play God. A professor at the University of Stanford is working on a superhero vaccine. That's what it's called, a superhero vaccine. The shot, he says, will transform the society. How? By offering long-term protection against multiple problems. We're talking about heart diseases, stroke, Alzheimer's disease, liver problems, you name it. This should be great news, right? Except it's not. The vaccine will be based on DNA of Olympic athletes. Trials for it will begin by 2026, we're told. And once injected, the vaccine will rewrite your DNA. A regular medicine changes a cell signal. This jab will change a gene letter, basically change your genetic makeup forever. Your body will become as resilient, they say, as an athlete's. But is this desirable? I really don't think so. It's true that Olympians have genetic advantages. They have stronger hearts, stronger lungs, they're resilient to certain conditions, and that's good for them. It's good for their exceptional performance on field. But do you and I really need the same genes? Just like athletes are good on track and field, you and I may be exceptional in our own field of work. If Usain Bolt runs at lightning speed, which is great, we also had Vincent van Gogh, whose paintings are out of the world. If Michael Phelps swims faster than fish, we also had Sylvia Plath, who poured her heart out on pages like no other. Must we harvest the creative genes of the likes of Plath and Van Gogh too? Then we should also take some traits from geniuses, the likes of Newton and Einstein. We would all be multi-talented and exceptional. We would all be superheroes. The only problem is, we would not be human anymore. We might be perfect, but not unique. It is our frail, dainty, unhealthy selves that makes us unique, that makes us us. Gene editing changes that. And unlike a regular vaccine, a gene-altering vaccine also changes the genes of our subsequent generations. And let me remind you, we're talking about humans here. Not malaria-resistant mosquitoes or genetically modified crops. We are talking about changing human genes forever. This is against nature. Our world, you see, is about survival of the fittest. We can't cheat by editing our genes. But this seems to be the trend now. Today we have designer babies, newborns who are genetically engineered, free of medical risks, and filled with desirable traits. In November 2018, a pair of twins was born in China, Lulu and Nana. They were designer babies. Their genes were modified before birth, made HIV resistant. He Jiankui was a Chinese scientist behind this gene editing. He ran a project, recruited couples where the man was HIV positive, but the woman HIV negative, uninfected. The scientist performed an IVF, in vitro fertilization, then introduced a mutation into the genes of the embryo. All of this was done secretly by using the CRISPR technology. The experiment was slammed. It was called morally and ethically wrong, and rightly so. The scientist was accused of trying to play God. The last we heard, he was jailed for 3 years. There were also reports that he'd gone missing. In China, you never know. Well, 3 years on, the CRISPR technology has only become cheaper. Scientists who pioneered it have been awarded the 2020 Nobel Prize for Chemistry. Our society is opening up to the idea of genetically modifying humans, like we're carrots. Articles are written highlighting its benefits. There are laws that now allow gene editing, as long as it is restricted to experts. Well, who are experts? The future may be different. Many believe that in future gene editing will become common. Even laypersons will be using gene editing technology. And until then, we have Instagram. Its filters edit us, change the structure of our nose, our cheekbones, the color of our hair. Instagram filters make us look fairer, blemish-free, thinner. In short, they make us look perfect. We all love Instagram filters. People are now excited about the superhero vaccines. You could call them genetic filters. China is already making enhanced soldiers, or trying to, and then there are designer babies being brought to life secretly. Is being our natural selves so bad? In this race for perfection, we may lose ourselves completely and end up creating Frankenstein's monsters. Think about it. On the 12th of July, we mark the 5th anniversary of the landmark international court arbitration that invalidates China's sovereignty claims over disputed islands in the South China Sea. But 5 years since the arbitration, China has repeatedly rejected the ruling, and the dispute over the South China Sea only keeps snowballing. Beijing is increasing its military presence around the disputed islands. Here's a report.
Tensions in the South China Sea have been simmering for centuries, and over the last few years, these have only intensified. 10 nations lay claim to parts of the South China Sea: China, Taiwan, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, Vietnam, Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, and Cambodia. The Spratly Islands and the Parcel Islands, believed to be rich in resources and a crucial point in trade routes, have been the main point of contention. For many years, China has claimed indice. Some Chinese officials even refer to it. At the heart of this claim is the U-shaped 9-dash line. It includes 90% of South China waters. The line was adopted from Chinese maps in the 1940s and represents Beijing's claim over the sea and the land contained within. In January 2013, Philippines took the fight to the United Nations. The island nation invoked Article 287 of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, challenging China's claims to a majority of the South China Sea. Both parties were invited at the Permanent Court of Arbitration to submit briefs on the Philippines' claims. However, China refused to recognize the PCA authority and opted out of the proceedings. After several hearings, on 12th of July 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in Hague gave a searing verdict on the lawfulness of China's island construction in the region and other actions in the South China Sea. China, however, stood by its claims within the so-called 9-dash line.
On July 12, 2021, we observed the 5th anniversary of the award of the South China Sea arbitration. The award conclusively settled the status of historic rights and maritime entitlements in the South China Sea. It declared as without legal effect claims that exceed geographic and substantive limits of maritime entitlements under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea.
Coming 12th of July will mark the 5th anniversary of a landmark international court arbitration that invalidated China's historical sovereignty claims over disputed islands in the South China Sea. But 5 years on, China's presence in South China Sea and around Philippines is only growing. Chinese boats, Chinese maritime enforcement vessels are more frequent than ever. In March this year, the Philippines complained of incursions by over 200 Chinese militia vessels into its exclusive economic zone. In the last 5 years, the Philippines had made 128 diplomatic protests over China's activities in the South China Sea. China has militarized the Spratly Islands. China allegedly has 3 airfields in the region. China's control over the South China Sea has geopolitical consequences for the United States. The year 2020 saw unprecedented moves by the United States military to deter China. Last year, both the United States and Australia rejected large parts of China's maritime claims in the region. United States has also been deepening ties with both traditional security allies, Japan and the Philippines. And even with Vietnam and Indonesia, the dispute has fanned the flames of the region's military and political rivalry, especially between China and the United States. Will the South China Sea spark the next global conflict? Bureau Report WION, World is One.
At least 52 people have died and more than 50 others have been injured after a juice factory in Bangladesh caught fire. The fire broke out last night and continues to rage on. There is no word on how many workers are still trapped inside. Authorities say they could have saved more lives had the factory supervisor not locked the stairwell. He locked it. This is not the first time workers in Bangladesh are losing their lives to negligence, corruption and lax enforcement of safety laws. Our next report brings you a timeline of Bangladesh's factory disasters.
This is a juice factory in Bangladesh. It used to be one. The building caught fire on the 6th of July. The blaze originated on the ground floor, travelled all the way up and trapped all of the building's occupants. Normally there would be over 1,000 workers in the factory, but many of them had left for the day when the fire broke out. Some workers jumped off the burning factory. Mohammed Saiful was among them.
On the third floor, gates on both stairwells were closed. Other colleagues are saying there were 48 people inside. If that's true, not even their remains could be found.
Narayanaganj is located some 20 kilometers from the capital city of Dhaka. 18 firefighters were rushed to the area from Dhaka and nearby towns. Distraught relatives also arrived at the spot looking for information of their loved ones.
We came here because my niece was not answering her phone for a while, and now the phone is not ringing at all. We are worried.
Almost 24 hours on, firefighting units are still struggling to douse the fire. So far, at least 52 people have died and 50 others have been injured. There is no word on how many workers remain trapped.
Relatives and eyewitnesses of the missing workers say none of the workers on the 4th floor of the 6-story building could get out because the security in charge kept the collapsible gate closed. They say 60 to 70 workers worked on that floor and many of them are still missing. Relatives of the missing workers are now crowding in front of the factory. Victims' family claims that the fire broke out due to the negligence of the factory authorities.
Bangladesh has a history of deadly factory fires. 123 people died in the year 2010 when a house illegally storing chemicals caught fire. In 2012, a garment factory fire on the outskirts of Dhaka killed over 112 people. In 2013, 1,100 people died after a multi-story building called the Rana Plaza collapsed. Bangladesh pledged reforms, but little changed on the ground. In 2019, a fire broke out in Old Dhaka. It ripped through shops and warehouses, killing at least 67 people. Another 25 people were killed later in the year when a commercial building caught fire. Bangladesh is a manufacturing hub for many big Western brands, but little or no heed is paid to the conditions of the workers here. Manufacturing facilities often flout safety norms. Rampant corruption and lax enforcement add to the misery of the workers. And sometimes their colleagues higher up on the ladder seal their fate. This time it was the factory supervisor.
The exit to the 3rd floor stairwell was locked. If the workers could have reached the rooftop, we could have saved them, like the 25 people we rescued with our crane. Only if they could have reached there, we would have been able to save them.
My son called me and said, "Oh mother, a fire broke out." After a while, his colleague called me and said, "He is no more. How could he survive?" The supervisor locked the stairwell exit and there was fire reaching the stairs already.
With inputs from Lakmina Jesmi Soma in Dhaka, Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Sri Lanka is struggling. It may not have enough money to cover its payments. In the next 12 months, Sri Lanka must pay back at least $2.5 billion to its creditors. The first payment is due this month. Sri Lanka must repay $1 billion to investors. The payment is due on the 27th of July. Ahead of the due date, Colombo is trying to control the money that leaves the country. Last week, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa issued an order. It placed limits on how much foreign currency can leave Sri Lanka. Overseas investments by local firms have been suspended for 6 months. Already, Sri Lanka has banned imports of luxury goods and cars. Report on the import of mobile phones, computers and electronic consumer goods. Sri Lanka is short on foreign currency reserves. Reports say the country's foreign reserves stand at around $4 billion right now, and that's barely enough to cover 3 months of imports. Sri Lanka has been borrowing more to maintain its reserve. In March, Colombo secured a $1.5 billion currency swap from Beijing. It has a similar arrangement with India for $400 million. What's a currency swap? It is effectively a loan that Sri Lanka can repay. So what happens is that Sri Lanka will get the funds in American dollars, in Sri Lankan rupees. That's a currency swap. Colombo has sought help from Dhaka too. Bangladesh has extended a $200 million loan to Sri Lanka. But borrowing has its limits. There is intense speculation that Sri Lanka may now need help from the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, the global lender of last resort. Last year, Sri Lanka had access to $1.5 billion of fund facility from the IMF. But it was ended prematurely. That's because Colombo decided to take help from its allies. And even with the IMF's help, Sri Lanka might need more support from neighbors like India. In fact, reports say that Sri Lanka is, quote-unquote, banking on a $1 billion currency swap from India, another $1 billion loan from China. This will be in addition to the $400 million swap from the Reserve Bank of India that they already have. Sri Lanka will use this funding for its dwindling reserves. Now, reports say India is yet to take a decision on the request. Should India help Sri Lanka? Colombo's total foreign debt stood at around $32 billion in March this year. Global ratings agencies have dramatically downgraded Sri Lanka. Ratings agency Fitch has raised doubts over Colombo's ability to repay due to its low foreign exchange reserves and rise. The question here is, would India like to extend another loan when time comes to repay? Chinese debt has already handicapped Colombo. Sri Lanka owes more than $5 billion to China from past loans. It is now stuck in a debt spiral. It is borrowing more money to pay back existing loans. In the next 6 months, Sri Lanka must settle payments worth more than $1 billion. This money is owed to different creditors. India's decision could very well decide how easy or difficult it will be for Sri Lanka to meet these obligations. We'll be watching the story. It's time to wrap. We're leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend.